the aegis determination drafting the final record. Marcus looked at the final evidence package sitting on his desk. The investigation file was almost complete. The case, known as the Aegis Project, involved Julian, a lead engineer, who alleged that Sophia, a senior manager, had accessed his workstation without authorization and copied confidential company code. Sophia denied the allegation. She explained that she was only trying to troubleshoot a printer connection and had no reason to access Julian's files. The interviews were finished. The evidence had been collected. Now Marcus had reached the most important stage of the investigation, drafting defensible findings. This was the stage where all the information gathered during the investigation had to be transformed into a clear, logical, and professional conclusion. Marcus knew that a good investigation report is not simply a summary of what people said. It must explain what the evidence shows, how the evidence was evaluated, and why the final conclusion was reached. The first thing Marcus considered was the standard of proof. He reminded himself that this was not a criminal trial. He was not required to prove the allegation beyond a reasonable doubt. Instead, workplace investigations generally use the balance of probabilities standard. In simple terms, the question is this version of events more likely than not to have happened? Some investigators describe this as the 50% plus a feather test. The evidence does not need to create absolute certainty. It only needs to show that one explanation is slightly more likely than the other. Marcus reviewed the evidence like a balance scale. On one side, there was Julian's statement and a witness who observed Sophia appearing nervous after the incident. On the other side, there was Sophia's direct denial and her explanation that she was only helping with a printer issue. Then Marcus found the piece of evidence that changed the balance. A digital forensic report showed that a USB device had been connected to Julian's computer during a 3-minute period. At the same time, access records showed that Sophia's badge had been used to enter the area where Julian's workstation was located. This digital evidence did not answer every question by itself. However, it provided important independent support that connected the timeline, the location, and the alleged activity. The next step was preparing the findings of fact. Marcus understood that even a correct conclusion could lose credibility if the report was difficult to follow. Therefore, he structured his findings using clear chronological snippets. Instead of writing long paragraphs filled with complicated details, he presented individual facts in a logical sequence. He separated information into 2 categories: facts that were not disputed. For example, both Julian and Sophia were working in the office that day, and facts that were disputed. For example, whether Sophia accessed Julian's workstation and what actions she took while there. Each factual statement was connected directly to supporting evidence. For example, at 3:02 p.m., Sophia's access badge was used to enter Wing B, C Exhibit C access log. This approach allowed any reader, even someone unfamiliar with the investigation, to follow the sequence of events and understand how the conclusion was developed. Marcus then focused on the most important part of the report, explaining the reasoning behind the finding. He knew one of the biggest weaknesses in investigation reports is simply stating, "The allegation is substantiated," without explaining why. A defensible report must show the reasoning path. Marcus explained why Julian's account was preferred over Sophia's explanation. He considered several credibility factors. Was the explanation plausible? Was it consistent with other evidence? Was there supporting documentation? Did either person have a reason to provide inaccurate information? Marcus noted that Sophia's explanation did not fully align with the digital evidence. Her explanation focused on the printer connection, but the evidence showed activity involving a USB device during the same period. The digital records provided stronger support for Julian's version of events. Therefore, Marcus used clear and evidence-based language. Based on the evidence available and applying the balance of probability standard, it is more likely than not that unauthorized access occurred. Finally, Marcus considered the confidence level of his finding. The formal conclusion was binary, substantiated or unsubstantiated. However, Marcus understood that decision-makers also benefit from understanding how strong the evidence was. Therefore, he applied a confidence rating to communicate the stability of the conclusion. Therefore, he applied a confidence rating to communicate the stability of the conclusion. Because the case included independent digital evidence supporting the witness information, Marcus assessed the finding as having a high level of confidence. This showed decision-makers that the conclusion was not based on personal judgment or intuition. It was supported by a strong evidence foundation. As investigators move into the drafting phase, remember that your role changes. You are no longer only collecting information. You become a disciplined trier of fact. Keep several principles in mind. First, apply the correct standard of proof. Do not search for absolute certainty. Ask, based on the evidence available, which explanation is more likely to be true. Second, build findings step by step. Use clear chronological facts that allow another person to follow your reasoning. Every important conclusion should be connected to supporting evidence. Third, show your work. If you accept one person's account over another, explain why. Identify the credibility factors that influenced your decision, such as consistency, plausibility, corroboration, and possible motivation to provide inaccurate information. Finally, communicate the strength of your conclusion. Confidence levels help decision-makers understand whether a finding is strongly supported by evidence or whether significant uncertainty remains. Before finalizing any investigation report, apply one final test. Could this report withstand public examination? If the findings appeared on the front page of a national newspaper, would the investigation process, reasoning, and conclusions still appear fair, professional, and ethical? A defensible investigation report is not simply a document that reaches a conclusion. It is a transparent record that shows how and why that conclusion was reached. As you move into the drafting phase, you must transition from a seeker of facts to a disciplined trier of fact. Think about the following as you construct your findings. First, evoke the standard. Do not hunt for absolute certainty. Ask yourself, is this version of events more likely than not? If the evidence tilts the scale even slightly, 51%, you have met your burden. Second, build with snippets. Write your findings of fact so they are reproducible by a third party. Use chronological snippets that build a logical staircase to your conclusion, ensuring every step is anchored to an exhibit. Then you have to show your work. Your report must provide the reasoning path. If you choose to believe one person over another, you must explicitly document the credibility factors, plausibility, consistency, motive that led to that preference. Lastly, rate the stability. Use confidence levels or truth values to tell the customer how strong your belief is. High confidence comes from cross-corroboration. Low confidence signals a deadlocked case that may require more investigation. In conclusion, when drafting defensible findings, you must apply the balance of probabilities, prepare findings of fact, documenting analytical reasoning, and assigning confidence levels.